Hello and welcome to Analysis with me, Oyin Adekunle. Now, Nigeria has slipped into its second recession in 5 years after recording a consecutive decline in the gross domestic product (GDP) for 2 consecutive quarters. The GDP went from a decline of 6.10% recorded in the second quarter of the year to another contraction of 3.62% in the third quarter of 2020, thereby marking a full-blown recession. Of course, the government has blamed the downturn on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, including lockdowns, disruptions in global supply chains, business failures, and rising unemployment. But joining me now on the program to discuss more on this is Timothy OLAWALE, the Director General of the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA. Mr. OLAWALE, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Now, we saw this recession coming. Are you surprised that it is not as bad as what had been projected, or even like the contraction in the second quarter of the year?
Well, there is no surprise in what we're experiencing now, because in recent times we have predicted it will come, and so we're not caught unprepared. The signs and the signals have been there all along, and it was just a matter of time before it manifests. Now we are there.
And how bad is the situation, or how bad do you project the situation to be? What should Nigerians expect?
You know, the nature of the economic recession we are facing now is more of inflationary impact. Therefore, what we expect is that policymakers, that is, those who are charged with crafting policies on our economy, in addressing this challenge, we expect them to do some sort of cost push to stimulate the economy. In our earlier opinion, because like I said before, we had expected that it will come, we have advised government, especially after the release of Q1 GDP growth rates, when it highlighted that the quantum of the intervention in stimulating the economy out of anticipated recession is too little. And we predicted that the economy will plunge into recession if not addressed. We advocated then for further increase in the stimulus packages, addressing sectors with huge potentials for job creation, construction, for instance, manufacturing, transportation, and trade. So this challenges surrounding even the issue of forex availability is also part of the issue. So all this holistically needs to be addressed. It's not a one fix it situation. Rather, it has to be looked at holistically, and a combination of options be used to address the situation.
I mean, we'll come back to solutions much later. But now the federal government has said that the recession will be short-lived. Even in the face of the COVID-19, we're already seeing some countries reimpose lockdowns, and we're warning of a possible second wave in Nigeria as well, and eventually maybe the release of a vaccine. How important is it now for the global economy to get back to normal?
You know, whether it's short-lived or is a long-term issue depends on our response to it. If the needful is done, just like we are proposing a combination of stimulus packages and options, and part of the option also is our dependence. You know, we keep repeating the issue of the need for us to diversify in real sense of it, rather than depend on a mono economy of oil. As long as we continue to depend on it, there is no way we won't be experiencing economic shocks like this. So if you don't do what you need to do, it's just a matter of time. You just assume that, oh, it's going to be short-lived and it may stay with you for a longer period. I mentioned in part the issue of diversification. You know, the challenge we have, we keep saying that it's not as if we don't have investment in a little of this, a little of that. but rather our concentration on an expiring commodity, oil, is what is actually causing havoc. Why is it difficult for us to really focus? I give it to government that government has done better nowadays with regards to the natural resources, the solid metals, solid minerals, and so on and so forth. But it is an half-hearted attempt. We should really go all out there and invest massively in this, as if our economy really depends only on it. We should just act as if we don't even have oil. And that way, you see that we muster the political will for survival economically and transcend all this issue of economic shocks and periodic recession.
And let's look at support for local manufacturers now. Recently, the federal government approved the ratification of the AFCFTA. Do you think that all of these policies and the ones that the federal government, the stimulus packages that has been released, we have the economic sustainability plan and all of that, how much role do you think this will help us in bouncing back to getting out of recession?
They are all laudable initiatives, but there is the doing aspect of it. For instance, African Free Continental Trade Agreement that Nigeria has keyed into. There is an aspect of it that has to do with implementation. So you don't just sit and fold your hands. Countries are now entering into treaties to give life to their relationship with one another based on this agreement. Nigeria is not moving yet. Rather, we are just waiting for manners to fall from heaven. Nigeria should get their acts together and start putting blocks, building blocks, bricks in place so that all the benefits accruable from the African Free Continental Trade Agreement can be annexed. That's one. Then secondly, with regards to our experience as manufacturers and as business people, you know, there are basic things that you do locally that will make you competitive internationally, even within Africa. Look at our ports. The port system is in a horrendous situation. There are goods there worth millions of naira that are just lying fallow there, and importers cannot clear them because of bottlenecks. And we have been crying to government to ease and liberalize the clearing system in the ports to facilitate ease of clearance and remove bottlenecks. Secondly, even implementation of basic laws, like for instance, as simple as value-added tax. The value-added tax has exclusions. Exclusions, for instance, in the supply of gas to facilitate production. Do you know that FIRS has actually been insisting on collecting value-added tax on gas despite the exclusion? So, and so on and so forth. So government puts policy in place to aid and stimulate businesses in one hand. On the other hand, even the implementers and the executors of those policies are also causing harm to businesses. And finally, on your question with regards to stimulus packages and sustainability plan, it all boils down to implementation. The stimulus packages, I hear the NASME, Association of Small and Medium Scale Enterprises, did a snap survey to find out how many of their members were able to access the small and medium scale enterprise fund that the Central Bank of Nigeria has actually been preaching is available, this and that. The point is, those that have accessed it so far are very negligible. And why is this so? It's basically because of red tapeism. In other words, there are more stumbling blocks to accessing the funds than even the availability of the funds. So you put all those before people or before businesses, and you make it difficult for them to access the funds. Here you say the funds are there. So it's a pitiable situation. We just hope over time we will overcome this, and our policymakers will also learn how to look at implementation, the challenges as we complain, and also put machineries in place to address it so that they can deliver on their mandate.
And now let's look at the ability of Nigerians to cope with this recession now. We know currently, even before the recession was officially announced, we saw what was happening with food prices in the market. And now we know Labour is currently fuming about the increase in fuel price. We also have the electricity tariff hike, all of that. Now, if, for instance, now perhaps the Labour decides to go on strike, how do you think this is going to affect our ability to cope with the economic challenges that is already on ground?
Well, I pray Labour does not go on strike, because it's actually going to compound the situation and increase the hardship on the people. Now, as things are, you know, Nigeria is a country where predictably there are responses and stimulus. We are going towards the Yuletide season, the Christmas, New Year celebration season. Even without increase in fuel prices, without increase in electricity tariff and the associated hardship, you discover that naturally prices will jack up at this particular period of season. On top of it now, we have all these increases. On top of it, the comfort or the palliative or the relief that government promised Labour are not forthcoming. So even if Labour had reasons to go on strike, I just want to urge them to exercise restraint, because those who will suffer more out of industrial action are even the workers that they are claiming to protect. Because as it is, businesses are struggling between the decision to retain their staff or to let them go. Initially, it was COVID. Then we had the NSAS protest. Then we had the looting and the arson. And many businesses are not producing as we speak. And on top of that, you want to go on strike again. So if the businesses collapse, basically, you are saying to your 10-to Israel, everybody go to your house. So it's going to increase more hardship on the populace.
Very well. So thank you very much, Mr. Timothy OLAWALE, for speaking to us on Analysis. Thank you for your time.
It's our pleasure. Thanks.
That was Timothy OLAWALE, the Director General of the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA, speaking to us there on the recession which Nigeria recently entered into. Well, we'll take a short break here, and when we return, we'll turn our attention to a developing story in Gombe State. Don't go away. All right, welcome back. Now, in recent times, the appointments of the Chief Judge of a state has been laced with all kinds of controversies. In Cross River State, for instance, we saw a situation where the seat of the Chief Judge was left vacant for about 46 days before the state governor swore in an acting CJ, which was actually the third in a space of 11 months. Now the Gombe State Judiciary is having to pass through the same thing. The state government has been accused of denying Justice Beatrice Ilia her elevation as Chief Justice, allegedly based on the personal opinion of the Attorney General of the state. Ilia, who is the most senior judge in Gombe State Judiciary, was appointed acting CJ, but instead of confirming her as the substantive CJ after the expiration of her acting capacity, a far junior judge, Moazu Pindiga, was appointed as the acting chief judge of the state. Now, what does this political interference mean for the judicial arm of government? Joining me now to speak more on this is Tunji ABDULHAMMED, a lawyer and political affairs analyst. He joins us via Skype from another part of Lagos. And thank you very much, Mr. ABDULHAMMED, for joining us on the program. Now, what do you make of the Gombe situation?
There's a petition against Justice ABDULHAMMED by some group alleging that the right person to be in that position, according to them, is Justice Beatrice Iliya of the state, who they say is the most senior judge in the state. You see, I wouldn't be able to condemn or applaud what has happened. I said I won't be able to criticize it because I have not. There was no reason given for a disqualification for not being given the CJ, because by virtue of Section 271 of the 1999 Constitution, there is no requirement that the person to be appointed must be senior. What the section says that the appointment of a judge of the CJ of the state shall be on recommendation from the Nigeria NJC, subject to approval by the House of Assembly. There was no issue of seniority in that regard. So, in other words, upon recommendation by the NJC, the governor can appoint that person as he wants to do. In other words, the NJC will be the one to screen and submit names to the governor in terms of recommendation. Yeah, I'm aware that Justice Beatrice was appointed as acting CJ when there was a vacancy in that seat, in line with Section 271, Subsection 4 of the Constitution. That section specifically states that the person to be appointed when there's a vacancy must be the most senior judge. And I think by appointing her, it's been complied with. And the section went further to say, look, that appointment, when you are appointed to act in that capacity, it will be for 3 months. You can only go beyond that 3 months, subject to approval of the NJC, Nigerian Judicial Council. So apparently, her tenure was not renewed, and a new person was put in place. Why that new person, that is Justice, what's it called now? Justice Muazu A. Pindiga. Why his tenure was on, he automatically, as a CJ, you are the head of NJC. So when they want to discuss the issue regarding a new acting the new CJ, he has to step aside, and then the AG came in as a pro-temporal chairman of the commission. And in that regard, they tried to send another name to 2 other names to this NJC without the name of the former acting CJ. That is the meeting.
And sorry to cut you here, but then in recent times, we've seen a situation where there's been interference from the executive on the appointment of a chief judge. And if you read that petition by Justice Beatrice Iliya, you'll see that she actually said she was stopped based on a personal opinion of the Attorney General of the state. Now, the question is, does the Attorney General have the power to dictate who becomes the chief judge of a state?
You know, when I started, I said I will not be able to be in a position to applaud or condemn what has happened because I was not part of the meeting. I'm only reacting based on the report I read on paper and what I hear from people regarding that appointment. And both parties are giving their own side of the stories. If the main grudges of the Justice Beatrice Iliya was that she was the one nominated before now or recommended, and the Justice Muazu A. Pindiga was put in reserve. But contrary to that position, another meeting was held, and she was removed completely from the list. So that was it. So, but I will not say it's an interference. It's a process of the law. The law says for a judge to be appointed, there must be a recommendation from the NJC. And NJC, like I said in the state, the chief judge is the head of that Attorney General is also part of the council. So in the absence of the day they want to discuss the issue, because the Justice Muazu Pindiga is an interested party, he has to step aside. And in that circumstance, the AG who happened to be the next in line in terms of the ranking to become the chairman was appointed as a temporary chairman So I will not see that as an interference. It's like a process as laid down by the law, and that's what they have been following in that regard. But though I will not sit here and say I'm not aware that politics is into it. Yeah, they play politics with it most time. In other words, there will be a lot of lobby, there will be a lot of political interest, and people will have to be influenced, whatever. But the governor will not on his own pick anybody. That's how I don't want to agree that they are being imposed. The governor will not on his own appoint anybody and say, this is my CJ. It should be a recommendation by NJC. It is when the governor on his own tries to say, I'm not waiting for any recommendation. I am appointing so and so person. That's when we say it's interfering into it. But if it's a process that has been followed, in other words, if the council have met and somebody has been recommended and two people have been recommended to the NJC, and the NJC has given it to the party across to the governor, and the governor acts based on that in that regard, I will not call that one interference. There might be an influence on that grant. We are in Nigeria. I'm aware of that. I can't deny that. People will influence on that grant, and policies will be as well.
And the reason I'm asking this is because it's becoming quite often, because we saw a similar pattern in Rivers State in 2015, I believe. And recently, we've also seen the Cross River State example, where the governor swore in 3 acting chief judges within the space of 11 months. So now we have a situation where there's no permanent CJ and just people in acting capacity, and eventually someone else entirely, most times a junior person, is sworn in as chief judge. Should this be the trend?
Yeah, it should not be the trend. But I'm not aware also that there's any provision in the law that says the governor cannot appoint an acting CJ when there's a vacancy. Yes, in this regard, they are on their own creating temporary, they are creating the vacancy to be able to achieve their objective. Yes, I agree with that. There's politics in it, and should not be the way. We should act based on the interest of the country, in the interest of the state, and not political interest or personal interest. So most times, these vacancies we are talking about are created because I don't see, the tenure of these CJs. You know when somebody's tenure will expire. Why are you not preparing before that tenure expire and ensure that as soon as he retired, somebody who's next in line or who has been recommended will be put in place rather than wait to start appointing what's it called? Acting CJ. This is not about death. There's no death. There's no incapacity. It's about retirement or something. So when that happens, I expect it's all about lack of planning, lack of adequate planning, or lack of deliberate efforts to put their own person in power. So if you have done the right thing, if that has been done, this issue would not even be like this. If you have decided to, okay, we are aware that the current CJ tenure will expire next year, and you start putting the process in place before the expiration, the day is going to expire. In fact, that's why before now, that's how it is. I don't been seeing vacancy until recently when they will say there's a vacancy in the position of a CJ because somebody retired yesterday and no one has been appointed. You are retiring today and that person is taking over. That's what I know when I started my practice. I'm over 20 years at the bar, and that's how I've been seeing. But recently, in the last 5 or 7 or 8 or so years, we have been seeing a situation whereby they will create a vacancy and they will say they are appointing acting CJ. Even at the federal level, the same thing is happening there. It's not proper and it should not be the way to go. We should be able to do things the right way, and we should not allow sentiment or other political or ethnic guide our decision in this regard.
And lastly, now before I let you go, what role, or should I say part now, should the NJC play in all of this? I mean, you just said it that it was until recently we started seeing a situation where the seat of the CJ is vacant. How can the system go back to what it's supposed to be? What can the NJC do?
In fact, if we are to blame somebody for anybody for that, what's it called, vacancy or whatever we're talking about now, NJC will be part of the blame because it is NJC. It is only when the NJC recommend that the governor can appoint. So in other words, if there's no recommendation from the NJC, that means there won't be any appointment by the governor. So the governor cannot appoint until there's a recommendation from NJC. So NJC is also even one of the culprits for ensuring that for bringing us to where we are in this regard. In other words, they are not doing their job before time, and they are allowing for vacancy to happen before appointing any CJ. So they have a blame. They have a blame in it. So they are part of the problem.
Well, Mr. Tunji ABDULHAMMED, political analyst and lawyer, we thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us on this important issue and analysis. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Well, with that, we've come to the end of this episode of Analysis. We thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.